Welcome to our revision summary on fueling vehicles. So first thing we need to consider then is what fuel do cars on the roads today actually use. And we've got two options really. They're either going to be running on petrol or on diesel. Now both of those fuels actually come from the same source. They both come from the fractional distillation of crude oil, and crude oil, which we hopefully remember from C1, is a fossil fuel. So what we actually find then, in order to actually use this, what happens is the fuel is burned in the engine of our car, generates heat, and that heat is then converted into two types of energy. First one is kinetic energy, which is going to make the car move, and the second is the electrical energy, which is going to power the radio and so on. Now, what we do need to bear in mind is that there are problems associated with these fossil fuel burning cars. First and foremost is pollution. So as those fossil fuels burn, we're going to be releasing various gases such as carbon dioxide, which is going to lead to obviously global warming, and things like our sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides, which will lead to acid rain. Second problem we've got there is that we've only got a finite amount of these fossil fuels left, so that means they will run out at some point. So we can have an alternative fuel source, which is known as a biofuel. Now, biofuels are actually made from plants. So what actually happens is, as that plant is growing, then it's going to be taking in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere during the process of photosynthesis. That carbon dioxide then gets converted into the actual plant's biomass. When we then burn that biofuel later on, we will release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. But the key thing to remember here is that we're not actually releasing any extra carbon dioxide into the atmosphere when we burn that fuel to what we took in when it was growing. So that's described as carbon neutral because the amount of carbon dioxide released when we burn it is the same as the amount we removed from the atmosphere as they grew. Another term we need to understand then is this phrase fuel consumption. Now, quite simply, what that actually refers to is the amount of fuel that our car uses as it's driving. Now, what we normally find is this is measured in miles per gallon, or mpg. What we'll find then is if we've got a more efficient car, then it's going to be able to travel a larger distance on that same amount of fuel. Because obviously the more efficient your car is, the less fuel it's going to have to burn to make it travel that same distance. Another alternative in terms of our cars is using an electric vehicle. Now, what we find there is that with your electric car, you plug it into the mains, and then the mains electricity is stored in batteries in the vehicle itself. Now, one thing to note is that these electric cars don't produce any pollution at what's called the point of use, i.e. when you're driving the car. However, they will be making pollution during the electricity generation process, because electricity is generated in power stations, and the vast majority of power stations in use in the UK today are still fossil fuel burning power stations. One other method for actually fueling our vehicles then is to use solar power. So with a solar power vehicle, then the electricity that's actually stored in those batteries is generated from the sun. Now, we do need to remember that it is actually stored in batteries. That's one of the most common questions that comes up. There are a couple of problems we need to bear in mind with our solar vehicles. One is that they're only going to charge up when the sun's actually shining, and the second one is that they will have a limited range.